Hi guys, Cameron White here. I'm the head performance coach at Flex Effect Performance Center. I'm a strength conditioning coach as well as a sports performance specialist. I am also a previous Division I sprinter. My main events were the 60 meter, 100 meter, as well as the 200 meter dash. So within this Sprint Biomechanics video series, I'm super excited to drop some knowledge bombs, not just from previous experience, but along my coaching experience of working from elite Division I level athletes all the way down to youth sport athletes. So this has allowed me to take some time to see some common faults, some errors that we often make as athletes, and some ways that we can drastically improve. So we're going to focus on the technique. We're going to focus on making sure we go through the intrinsic pieces of the different parts of our race, and then talk about what is the sport that you're participating in and how is it going to apply to make you the most explosive, the most dynamic, the fastest athlete that you can be. Excited to dive into content, guys. Let's get after it. So key factors of appropriate sprint ability here, and really we have 4 laid out, and there's some other characteristics that we could talk about are all valuable, but we've really broken down to make it simplistic to 4 main things. And these really are 4 things that we focus on. We're going to be more explosive, we're going to be more dynamic, and we're going to be better biomechanically at running fast. So first is proper biomechanics. We always like to focus with our athletes on making sure that we understand appropriate technical aspects of sprinting. We're going to see flexion and extension, as well as internal and external rotation. Now, the internal and external rotation is one that we don't often think about, but we're also going to be popping in some vid here of some high-level guys, and when they're sprinting, you will notice that at toe off there is going to be, as we're pulling through the ground, as we're getting a good force application and a good cycle through the ground, we're going to have a moment where we're going to create some internal and some external rotation, and the best do it seamlessly. So that is a skill we can practice, as well as a mobilization. We want to make sure that we groove in so that our central nervous system is programmed to pick up and we're not having to think about it too much. We really want to focus on understanding what we want to accomplish from a technique perspective before we go and worry about the acceleration phase and the top end speed phase and the maintenance phase. Second, stride length. Stride length is a factor. I'm a very tall, 5'8". Pushing 6'2", but also what made me fast, guys, and able to be able to sprint at the next level was my stride length. Even for a shorter athlete, you can maximize your stride length. Now, sometimes that can cause problems or error because we're going to over-exaggerate maybe, and we don't want to get into a circumstance of where we're over-exaggerating. We want to make sure that we're maximizing our appropriate stride length, and that's based on our individual anthropometrics and physiology. Next, we have stride frequency. So you can have a nice lengthy stride, but it can be super slow, and that's not going to be effective. So again, based on the individual athlete, we have to focus on a good stride length, and we have to have a good stride cadence, and that's an individual aspect. And finally, force production. So the best athletes, the fastest people on the planet, the most explosive, dynamic athletes put these 4 things together: proper biomechanics, stride length, stride frequency, and ultimately force production. The sprint is the most sexy power builder in the game. If we think about the physics definition of power, it's force times distance over time. So if we think about that is the sprint. It is one of the few things in the game here where we can, at a very high velocity, create extremely high forces. So in this video, we have a very handsome, athletic athlete that is out there on the street, hitting the pavement, working on the grind. Had an opportunity with a police radar set up that is going to tell us that miles per hour as we're going through, to get out there and get in the dirty, man, get in the concrete jungle and get some sprint work in. So here we go. So, first off, want to highlight the approach that I'm going to use in a standing variation, we'll see with a jump athlete in track and field. If we're doing the long jump or the triple jump, we're going to get that lean as we go. Just something that allows me to create some momentum as I'm going into the sprint. And create those levers and angles. And speaking, that's going to be the first point that we make here as creating momentum and the angles we're going to utilize to do so. I want to start with the first thing we notice here, and that's the arm drive. So we have two arm movements going in opposing directions here, and that is going to allow us to create maximum propulsion. Think about it. If you put your hands on your hips and you go try and sprint, how's that going to work out? Just like the difference of if you put your hands on your hips and you're going to go create a vertical jump, exercise or test, and then now use your hands. So the arms are big movers, with top end speed and overall explosive power. So the big thing here is drive. So the next thing I want to highlight is the extension through the leg. The angle we're creating through the leg here at toe off. So we talk about triple extension often in exercises like Olympic lifting or jumping exercises geared to replicate that. And this is really what we're talking about. So the arms are driving. I have one going in reverse and then that counterbalance going forward to allow me to, maximize the linear acceleration, create big drive. Then also there's an anti-rotational component as my core has to brace. So as I'm getting that pump going, I have to be able to keep the core loaded up as well as create those forces going in that linear direction. So we have a really good toe off example. The heels are off. I'm pushing like crazy. And then also we have this knee lift here. So the knee is raised as well as the toe being up. So we have dorsiflexion. So that's really the key phases of our drive phase. Now another thing we want to highlight is the angles created here in this start phase. Oftentimes athletes will sacrifice really good angles trying to replicate this, and instead of really driving through with a piston-like action, they're going to just hinge over from the hips, and that's not going to allow us to be the most effective. And you'll see a lot with a standing start. When someone starts going, they're kind of running here like this, and they're driving the arms instead of truly extending and getting the maximum toe off and propulsion from that ground. So now what I want to show again to reiterate that point is the angles that I have here. From the hips through the leg here through the knee, I'm pulling about 80 degrees. Now let's see again if I can recreate. So absolutely not, but the goal here was to recreate the same angle. So what we get here from this 80-degree relatively angle, and again, those lines are not going to be exact, but we want the same angle as we're looking from the upper body perspective. So what the upper body is producing, we want to see that same angle. So we want to see that line continue. So as I'm coming here, what I want to see from athletes are we able to create the same kind of trajectory? And this degree thing is going a little crazy on me, so we're just going to move on. But it's going, we want to see the same angle. So from the knee joint angle coming forward to the upper torso is something to look forward to make sure that we're going to be able to replicate that success as we get going. So now as we get going into the phase, you'll notice that I'm really utilizing a push against the ground. I have that swing leg coming forward, and now I'm entering that acceleration phase. So with the acceleration phase, the acceleratory phase, the goal still remains the same. I'm really cycling through, creating massive force and propulsion from the ground, and I'm utilizing the arms to really allow me to drive. My eyes are focused into the ground, and you can really see here the arms exaggerated. There's a big angle from the arms, and then that directly is going to carry through through the lower body, through that leg as we're going through that acceleration phase. So big keys as well during the run, and this angle may be a little difficult to see. You can see this back leg here, and this is going to be the foot that we focus on. Our foot here. is going to be the one that is going to create, as we're pushing off the ground, we're going to see some internal and some external rotation. Let's see if we can catch it. See that heel? It's going to come through, heel away, and now I'm going to hit that internal rotation, and boom, the heel's going to kind of kick out as you cycle that thing through. So as we start becoming in that phase where now I'm seeing my torso become upright, which is allowing me to go through my arms, driving, and now really getting into that acceleratory phase, picking up maximum speed. And for sport, this is really the crux of what we're talking about here. We have to be able to accelerate really quickly, and the way we're going to do that again is maintaining a tight core. We talk about maybe a 10-degree lean here from the upper torso angle, and then again I'm driving that knee up. I'm seeing that foot cycle through, and I'm just putting a lot of force into the ground and really rapidly. So now we're going to start getting into that max velocity phase. As we're going to that max velo phase, we want to continue to see as I rise, it's gradual. You know, there's not just a jerk or a jump. Sometimes you see athletes go from the drive phase to popping straight up, and you're losing all that momentum, all that trajectory that you're getting in the drive phase. So now I've accelerated. As I start to come up, you'll see that the legs, even though they're behind me because I'm getting that relative triple extension, I'm pushing, the cycle comes through, the heel is staying close to the rear, and then immediately snapping right up. And the knee is going to drive. I'm going to that hip flexion, and as it snaps forward, the leg is going to meet under the center of my body. And that's another point we want to make, is that, you know, we talk about stride length and stride frequency. We want to make sure that these things are lining up. So even if we have a good stride length, and even if we're focused on rate of force production, we want to make sure that our feet are landing under our center of mass, which allows me to replicate that big pull through the ground and then keep things turned over and whipping fast. It happens naturally, you know, but that's something that absolutely is training. Let's go ahead and get that top number there. There's a 2-1 we're going to see flash, and boom, right, it's in there. There it is. There's a 1 flashing. You know, there's a 2-1. So right there, we got it. There's proof. 21 miles an hour, blazing. Let's talk about breaking down the phases of the sprint. We have, first off, the drive phase. We're going to build momentum. We're going to utilize gravity, and it's really about angles. And so you hear a lot of things like triple extension used, and why there's been all this work done around Olympic lifting. For not just sprints, but for building power. You know, triple extension definitely is what we're seeing in a block start. Some athletes, if we're playing sport and we're in a 2-point stance on that, you may never even come to full triple extension, but regardless, learning how to create that piston action and apply those forces down horizontally as well as vertically are going to be big in the drive phase. So next we go into our acceleration phase. And this one is, one of the big ones, especially in sport. If you want to get separation in sport, you have to have big acceleration. If I lay down a bunt in baseball and I have a really good acceleration, I'm going to get there. If I have maybe a good top end speed but a poor acceleration phase in sport, that's not going to do you well. Next is max velocity, and that's what I was just hinting on. You can have an athlete that has one and not the other. You can have an athlete that is still a hollow athlete and has just a few of these phases together. But if we put all these together, we're maximizing our potential to move from A to B the fastest. So max velocity, and then that takes us into the maintenance phase. Now the maintenance phase, really applies to an event where you're going to have the length to open up and go into a maintenance phase. Oftentimes, you're not going to find yourself just wide open and gliding. So now we have a few cats that you might know, you might have heard on. We've got, Asafa Powell, probably the best starter, out the blocks in history. I'm going to say it. I mean, this guy is beautiful. So we talk about angles here, and again, if we're talking about the drive phase at the start, a lot of times we want to see something like 90 degrees in our front leg, and then we want to see maybe like 130, give or take, in the back leg. And he's a little bit open, a little different than that, and it went to 131 and 91, but you guys get the point that I'm trying to make here. Just make sure, again, this is going to be individual to the athlete. And if you're not going to use a block application, yeah, not as big as a concern. But what we want to look at here, guys, is the things that we've been talking about. We have a really good example of what's happening. A big push. Look at those arms. You can't even see the top arm. He has so much swing in those arms. He's really driving through. And let's look at this swing leg as it's coming through. I mean, look at this thing here. We've got the knee. Now that, guys, is triple extension. Holy cow. We've got this leg loaded. This toe is loaded. I mean, this cat knows what he's doing, and that's why he got paid to do this. Now we're going to fast forward to arguably the best of all time, and not just from a biomechanics, this guy's a freak, but you know, the world record holder. And that's Usain Bolt. You guys might have heard of him. If you haven't, get up on that rock. Go YouTube him. So this guy does a phenomenal job of creating massive angles. And here's an example we talk about. We don't always see exact triple extension. You'll see even with Usain Bolt here, the knee is slightly bent. And if he does it, that's okay because he ran fast. So, you know, he's still getting a push from the ground and he's still being aggressive through. And look at this swing leg. When he starts coming through, but I mean, he literally kicks himself in the rear here. And then, you know, he's going to drive this right through. And look at this snap. The knee is up. I mean, aggressive knee angle. Look at this thing. Vertical shins, arms extended, eyes are forward, looking down the track. It doesn't get much better than that. And he's going to snap that foot under. Look where the ground contact is. Boom. When he's making contact on the ground, it's under the body. And that's where all that propulsion, all those horizontal and vertical forces are happening at. So a great job there, obviously, from, you know, the best of all time. And we're just looking again in this max velo phase, and often Usain was so far ahead he would just kind of throw up the dub and do whatever towards the end of the race. And I don't recommend that for everybody, but well, again, what we're really focused on here is what a good job he does from creating big ground propulsion. His arms are utilized very well, his eyes are downfield, but you get a really good example of also exterior part of the metatarsal, inside ankle bone high as he's coming through the run. You know, he does such an amazing job of what a beautiful and what a long stride. And then his frequency, though he was a little slower in the start, and that's something he worked on over his career, became you know, expedited throughout the race. And he just had a massive turnover, and he had phenomenal rapid force production. I love to have a force plate on this guy and see what kind of forces we're creating. But you can just look at here, ideally what we're seeing. So even my taller guys, here's a great video of how you're a taller athlete. And a lot of times my taller athletes kind of run, you know, stick-legged almost when we're going through and running. We want to be able to still get this drive and get this foot under the body as we're coming through. Boom! Right there. There's the power, baby. And just a beautiful example of staying in his frame. You know, you speed that thing up, that's about as fast as Usain ran. You know, this thing sped up. But just a really great job of creating momentum through utilizing his body in a really aggressive manner, and then keeping his mechanics up under his frame so that it's really natural for his body.